All right, gentlemen, so now may be a good time to discuss the possible sanctions for Queretaro as a club. Now, what we do know is that Tuesday, tomorrow, there's an emergency meeting of Liga MX owners. We expect some of Queretaro's fate to be decided then. What do you think that fate should be?
What I think it should be is Queretaro has no place in Mexican soccer anymore. They just show the lack of control. They're not prepared to be a Primera División team. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it will send a message, right? Because the images that we saw had no precedent in the history of Mexican soccer. So the punishment probably has to be unprecedented as well. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Reports are that there is a very strong group of owners that are pushing for the disaffiliation of Queretaro from La Liga MX. I believe that's what happened because people are now saying, hey, what about the under-20 teams? What about the women's team? What about the under-17 teams, the academy? Well, what about the people that almost lost their lives, right? So if you cannot, as a ownership group, guarantee the security, the safety of your fans, of players, of staff, then you shouldn't own a professional soccer team in Mexico.
What do you think, Herc?
I'll start off with the statements from CONCACAF and FIFA that to me are very weak.
Yeah, it feels like a washing of the hands, or at least a quick distancing, right?
Quick distancing is a very good term. That's what it is right there. So, very weak. I've gone through this a bunch in my head. Mao just mentioned the U20 team, the U17 team, the Fuerzas Básicas, the community that depends on this team, the women's team, a whole town, city propped up on this corporation because it's a brand. It's not just a team, it's a brand. All those people that depend on this team. But after what we've seen, I don't see how you can't vote to kick them out of Mexican football. If it means Querétaro is out of Mexican football, so we never see anything like this again, I'm okay with it. You talk about these jobs. In any business, any line of work, you're out of a job, you go find a job. There's a fianza, okay? There is money that the Federation has for these teams in case anything like this happens, so they can pay off the players, all those involved, give them their money, allow them to be free agents and find a different line of work. But the ownership group of Querétaro, of Gallos, should never be tied around Mexican football again. One of the owners, one of the investors in Querétaro is an American by the name of Greg Taylor, who also happens to be an agent.
Yep.
He also happens to have his hands in other teams with other players and coaches.
And that's not obvious conflict of interest.
If that's not a conflict of interest, so you're starting off bad. From the ownership group to the way that Querétaro became a first division team, having to buy their promotion, because that was Chiapas.
Yep.
That wasn't Querétaro's.
If you do kick Querétaro out forever, right, you set a precedent. And to your point, it's a precedent that I think would send a very strong message. But I can't help but think, especially what you just mentioned about Adolfo Rios, that this could have happened anywhere. So what if this had happened at Azteca? Or what if this had happened at a Chivas match? I mean, those are the two, or Tigres, or Rayados, or any of the big brands of Mexican football. Do you think that kicking them out forever would still be on the table? Or is this because it's Querétaro?
It's because it's Querétaro.
It'd never be
If this had happened to America, Pumas, Chivas, we wouldn't be having this conversation to kick the team out of the league forever.
Right.
But I think there's also different context to that, right? Because I personally spoke about my experience with Club America and how they handled having two barras, not only one, two ultras, right? And how they handled the situation. Apparently, they did what the federation asked them to do, and they were able to control the problem right on the spot. Now, can this happen to another team like Atlético de San Luis? Yeah, it might happen, right? And we don't question the ownership group, right? Because the owners, they are Atlético de Madrid, one of the most respected institutions in world soccer. So I do understand that this is Querétaro. This is not the strongest team, and that's why we believe it's quote unquote easier to punishment this hard.
Now, that precedent you're talking about, if they kick Querétaro out, if it happens to an America or Chivas, certainly you must do the same. Is exactly why I feel it won't happen.
Right.
That's exactly why.
So what do you think we'll get? Maybe a ban for the rest of the season?
I think we're going to get a Querétaro Corregidora ban for the rest of the year. This ownership group will have to sell. They'll probably give them a 6-month timetable term to sell. and then they will be out of Mexican soccer, I should say, because I don't think that people will forget. You mentioned the big team. Jorge Vergara, may he rest in peace, before he passed away, was one of the only owners that was a proponent in trying to eliminate these barras from Mexican football. The owner of the biggest, arguably the biggest brand in Mexican football's history, doesn't want the ultras, doesn't want the barras. Why? That you have to take a look at that, and why are the other owners shying away from this?
Yeah. If there's one thing I don't want to see in this resolution, look, that we just heard from Emmanuel, like the people of Querétaro who love this team may lose this team, and that might be the just thing to happen based on how serious it was. What I would hate to see is the owners that you guys are talking about then allowed to sell this franchise, make their money back, while the people of Querétaro lose their team because these owners couldn't properly run a franchise. That, to me, would be a horrific shame. So
I heard from one executive earlier today, and I asked him, what do you think is going to happen, how the owners see tomorrow's meeting going down? And he said, it's hard to make that decision, right? Because there's a lot of money involved. There's TV money involved. There are contracts that are involved, player contracts, staff contracts. He said one of the solutions is, yes, forcing the owners to sell the team and banning the city, the state of Querétaro, to having a professional team for 5 or 10 years. Even if that happens, I do believe as a federation, as a league, you have to let them know that if this happens again anywhere else, this is what the punishment looks like for those who cannot control or to take the measurements that are needed in order to have a professional team nowadays.
Seb, one of the reasons I think you won't see something like a team getting kicked out is because I feel these owners have no idea how to protect the stadiums, have no idea what can happen next, have no idea or had no idea how much of a stranglehold, as you put it, these barras had on these teams.
So they don't want to set that precedent themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.